I'm wearing my Gluck Gluck 9000.
Pretty much the same. Both are depicting beautiful women.
Yeah.
In our own way.
We're here for it.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hello, Sovereign.
Hi.
Sovereign Sire.
Hi, Ella. Should we start?
Let's start.
Okay. Greetings and welcome to Ill Repute, the podcast about women and women first. I'm Sovereign Sire, a writer, a comedian, and an authoress.
And I'm Ella Darling, a former librarian, a VR pioneer, an erstwhile adult film performer, and a no-good rabble-rouser.
I like it.
My cat meowed in solidarity. He was like, yes, you are. Now, here at Ill Repute, we support women's rights.
But more importantly, we support women's wrongs. Speaking of which, if you want to support these women's wrongs,
yes.
We have a Patreon.
We do indeed, and if you're already subscribed to our Patreon, then you maybe got a little message from us today teasing you about what this episode is about.
Yes. So you can support us at patreon.com/illrepute. We have one tier, it's $5. You get uncensored video, you get a bonus episode every month, you get scripts, you get... we're working on getting a Discord so we can have some community. And it's just a way to help support your scrappy little content creators. And moving on from that housekeeping,
Yes.
what woman's wrongs are we writing today, Miss Ella Darling?
We'll call her Lady Literature.
Ooh, Lady Literature.
Yes, today we are talking about misery lit. So, what the hell is misery lit? And why do we care, Sovereign?
Oh. Misery lit. Inspirational memoirs. Austere autobiography. When you suffer through a childhood marred with horrific abuse, violence, rape, and abandonment, sharing your story can be therapeutic, but publishing it can become a career. Is our consumption of this media exploitative and voyeuristic, or is it a therapeutic lens through which we process our own lived trauma?
Misery literature is a genre of memoir that details the real-life struggles and adversities of individuals, focusing particularly on themes of abuse, poverty, addiction, and survival against the odds. They are usually harrowing stories of the author's survival through complex trauma, usually told from the first-person perspective, which generally end in, if not a happy conclusion, at least a ray of hope as the abuse cycle is broken. According to frequently cited statistics, about 80 to 90% of the readership is female.
Kind of very much like true crime.
Yes.
There are very similarities, and if you're eager listeners, that episode is coming.
Yeah.
There's no way I was going to have a podcast about women and not talk about true crime, so it's coming.
Well, to speak to something that you've brought up about this, so I'm crediting you with this idea in my head. I think women like seeing authentic stories featuring women, whether it's porn that is, a maybe kind of realistic depiction of female pleasure, or stories where a woman's life story isn't sugar-coated and it acknowledges that kind of sucks being a woman.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stories that tell our stories truly without, giving our trauma some purpose for men or for plot beyond us.
Helen Forrester was credited with inventing the misery memoir genre in 1974 with her bestseller, 2 Pence to Cross the Mersey, where she recounts her experiences growing up in poverty in Depression-era Liverpool, England. A cultural touchstone in the genre is Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, in which she tells the story of her early adolescence struggling with racism, rape, literacy, and self-affirmation as a young Black girl growing up in the 1930s era Deep South. But it wasn't until the late 90s and early 2000s when misery lit as a genre really took off and became a publishing trend. Early titles that led the publishing trend were Frank McCourt's 1997 book, Angela's Ashes, which recounts the author's horrors and catastrophes that he suffered growing up impoverished in 1930s Ireland, and A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer, published in 2000, in which he details the abuse he claims to have suffered at the hands of his alcoholic mother.
For the author, the writing process can be cathartic, allowing them to acknowledge their trauma while offering hope to other survivors and demonstrating resilience in the face of cruelty and horror. Through their stories, they can put a spotlight on societal and cultural issues that are frequently overlooked or stigmatized. Maya Angelou on Oprah talking about catharsis when writing I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
So when you wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, was that a cleansing and a proclaiming of yourself to the world?
I don't think so. I've heard that that's what it was supposed to be. But,
Really?
You know, that it was supposed to be in its own way cathartic and that. I don't know about that. I didn't feel that I had doffed a particular mortal coil, you know. I felt I had tried to write the truth and write it eloquently. But I don't know, you know, that I never agreed with Thomas Wolfe's statement that you can't go home again.
Really?
My belief is you never can leave home. You take it with you.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere you go. So my past is my present.
And everything that's happened in your past is what makes you who you
That's
are
right.
right this moment.
That's all.
Some readers find solace in tales of trauma that may, in part, reflect their own traumatic experiences. There's a certain gripping appeal in the rage-inducing, harrowing page-turners that drive the reader to read on until the chaos resolves itself. For some, voyeuristic consumption of another person's tragedy can mitigate their own. It's a genre that sells moral outrage with mass market appeal. And we're going to watch a video about the impact of Ms. Angelou's autobiography.
Put a rainbow in the clouds.
Maya Angelou rose to fame with her 1969 autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It details a harsh childhood in Arkansas filled with poverty, segregation, and violence, and ends when she became a teen mother.
Not only did she help to empower women and girls around the country who've been victims of sexual assault or abuse, but also to do it in a way with dignity and with grace and respect.
Khalil Gibran Muhammad, director at the Schomburg Center, says important pieces of that autobiography are here.
We actually have notes where she writes Bible verses down, and she's actually looking for a chapter and verse of what she's going to use in the written work, as well as the handwritten manuscript.
Upon learning of her death, they pulled items out of the collection of her work tucked away that they purchased back in 2010. The new exhibit is called Phenomenal Woman, Maya Angelou.
We lost a literary giant, a woman who is deeply committed to celebrating the best in human being. We have correspondence with many other writers, James Baldwin, Malcolm X.
Muhammad says Angelou spoke at the Schomburg Center years ago and talked about how important libraries were and why she wanted her work here.
Because she knew that it would be a place where the young and old, the scholars and the semi-literate, the person on the street and the presidents of universities could come and be inspired by it.
Wow. Hearing Khalil Gibran's voice, like hearing him of all people, like, holy, that's, I'm like catching my breath over here. Holy shit. So when tragedy becomes profitable, charlatans reach for their quill.
Right.
You know?
I mean, and that's the thing, the impact of a book like that, I think, what writer does not dream of having that kind of legacy and impact? It was not long before controversies arose in the misery lit genre, when celebrated authors were revealed to have presented exaggerated or entirely fabricated accounts of lives that they never lived. In Literary Hoaxes and the Ethics of Authorship by Louis Manon for The New Yorker, he describes, quote, what is known in narratology as the autobiographical pact. This is the tacit understanding that the person whose name is on the cover is identical to the narrator and the I of the text. There are a myriad motivations for an inspired writer to violate this pact. Fame, artistic acclaim, a ham-fisted overstep in the name of altruism, or just a clean and simple cash grab, profiting on the genre du jour.
Regardless of intent, These literary hoaxes have a profound impact on the communities of survivors they purport to champion with their prose, and on the readership as a whole. The publication and popularity of these stories raise questions about authenticity, the ethics of storytelling, and where various burdens of responsibility lie with authors and publishers.
Misery lit as a genre crafts a complex interplay between empathy, voyeurism, and cultural stereotypes. It reveals both the desire to connect with and understand the suffering of others and a tendency to commodify and exploit these experiences. It often portrays women overcoming adversity, highlighting themes of suffering, abuse, and resilience. This focus can reinforce societal views that valorize women's endurance in the face of hardship, potentially romanticizing suffering as an inherent aspect of the female experience.
It suggests a societal comfort with, or even expectation of, women as survivors of adversity, inadvertently perpetuating the notion that suffering is a defining or redemptive feature of womanhood. It underscores a cultural fascination with damage as a key aspect of femininity, potentially sidelining women's stories that don't fit this mold. This is particularly reinforced when a memoir is penned by a celebrity. Readers and critics alike are eager to sift through the nuanced reflections on fame, personal growth, and resilience to seek out the small golden nuggets of lurid details about the author's deeply personal public trauma. We saw this with Rose McGowan's book Brave, where she comes forward to speak about her experiences with Harvey Weinstein, and Sharon Stone's book The Beauty of Living Twice, where in her very personal story about having a stroke and surviving a lot of things, people really just dug down into her discussions about trauma surrounding sexual assault and harassment.
Yeah. And when these memoirs come out, every headline is around, they accused this person of this. And like, yeah. And especially, I recently was listening to Sharon Stone was on Louis Theroux's podcast. And he started by asking about her health and like her stroke. And nowhere was that the headline. Every headline was about how she had been pressured. She didn't do it, but she'd been pressured by the director of Sliver to actually sleep with her co-star to create better chemistry because his acting was so dead in the water. It was Billy Baldwin. And then he came out and was like, she's blooded. And it turned into this thing about like he was denying her reality. And she had never said he was privy to that conversation.
Right.
She said that the director had taken her aside and legitimately asked her to do that. Right. And that overpowered like anything else that was in the book. And it's like, there's no way that's the most fascinating or interesting thing that has happened in her career or her life.
Yeah, it's demeaning. It
Right.
really diminishes a woman's entire life story to how it is actually the voice of a man's experience and not her own.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that men are the primary figure in any story, even if it's your own autobiography.
Yeah. I got an MFA in creative writing and creative nonfiction and poetry. And I was I was sexually assaulted by a professor when I was in my undergraduate, and in one of the creative nonfiction courses, I wrote an essay about it, and my troubled marriage, and they were like, "Oh, you've got to write a memoir." I just went through it. Like, I don't want to relive that. I don't want that to be the defining thing about me. Is like that story,
Right?
Like, ew,
Yeah.
you know. And because that's inevitably what happens. And I've known women that were, when, a dude was exposed for being, creepy or inappropriate, where I knew more women that had chosen not to come forward for that exact reason. They didn't want it to be that their name was next to his anytime someone put their name in a search engine, and they did not want that to become like the defining thing about their career or who they are. So like it's a very real thing. And in my MFA, like, I mean, there was this pressure to sort of mine your life for like struggle. And if you were a female, like, I don't know how many essays about sexual assault and domestic violence that I read. And it's not to diminish those stories, but it was also like you are asking people to write about stuff that like you're not necessarily equipped to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was leading an English 1 class. I was teaching at university, and in kind of mimicking my own instructors, they were to write a personal essay. And one of my students wrote this essay about the death of her father, who had passed away the year previous. And as we're discussing the writing, she breaks down crying and leaves. And I go run after her. Like in all of that, I had forgotten the human being that was sitting there.
Right.
Right. And I never assigned students anything like that again. And I went to my mentors and I was like, I know that we ask students to write about their personal experience because it's a very easy thing when you're trying to teach someone the craft of essay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, but we're dealing with a demographic of students that have been through a lot of migrant students, a lot of first generation students that experience things like crossing the border illegally, a lot of poverty, stuff like that. Right. And I was like, you're asking them like they're not middle class white kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of these kids that are in English 1 that are there because it's a general ed requirement. And you're asking them to like tell these stories that they haven't even processed yet. And like, I know that I'm certainly not equipped to help them process that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. And so I think that's the other thing is this voracious appetite for these inspirational stories, it creates an ecosystem where the human being is completely forgotten.
Inspirational stories is one of the ways that some booksellers describe misery lit, but I didn't include that because living in America, especially living in the Deep South, most literature labeled inspirational just means Christian, and I didn't want to get things mixed up.
Yeah,
because you can only be inspired by the good Lord Jesus Christ. The eagerness to consume such stories might reflect a broader societal voyeurism towards women's pain, where the line between understanding and exploitation of female suffering becomes blurred. If there's only room in the bestsellers list for women's memoirs that are specifically laden with trauma, then the societal message to women is clear. Women's trauma, like our bodies or sexuality, is a very lucrative vertical.
When people find out I'm a writer, one of the first things that people will pitch me is they want something about my time doing sex work. Mm-hmm. And I always go like, I hate to disappoint you, but it's literally the least interesting thing that's ever happened to me.
I've done a lot of interviews in the press for my VR stuff for porn, but early on for activism, for stuff in the adult industry specifically, talking to legislators, talking to media. And one of the things that I realized very early on I had to establish is that if a journalist reaches out to me and they want to talk to me about being a sex worker, I need to know that they aren't going to turn it into some victim's narrative where I am, my work is pathologized. I'm clearly just sick, so I'm doing this. I'm not going to lend my time for free to somebody who's going to take it and tell a story that's not mine.
So we're going to talk about 4 different really big books that fall into the category of misery lit.
Specifically, misery lit and literary hoaxes. And these 4 I chose specifically because they were very impactful on publication. Their initial reception was very impactful, very important to the people who read it. And the aftermath of the truth was also pretty impactful on both that community and beyond. So there's so many examples, and I would love to hear your favorite because I know that I missed it probably, but here are just 4. You, the listener, and you, Sovereign, as well.
Well, I think the broader point is that you would be hard pressed to find many examples of misery lit that are not hoaxes. It'd be harder to find an example of it that is real. And it might be Angela's Ashes and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I think maybe Black Boy by Richard Wright. You'd be more hard pressed to find these narratives that don't turn out to be completely made up under like minimal scrutiny. But I think I like the 4 examples you picked. Like these were all really big and they impacted different communities and they kind of bring up different ethical kind of concerns around who gets to tell a story. The first one we're going to be talking about is J.T. Leroy. J.T. Leroy's books, Sarah and The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things, published in 2000 and 2001, quickly gained critical acclaim for their raw portrayal of life on the margins of society. The books are about young Jeremiah Terminator Leroy, who grew up in a rough home with a neglectful mother suffering from addictions of various kinds. He is groomed at a young age into child prostitution at a truck stop, scrambled around in the child welfare system, and bouncing around between his mother's latest boyfriend's trailer and various foster homes. The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things was adapted into a feature film starring and directed by Asia Argento, who became particularly close with JT over the years.
So we're going to watch the trailer from The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things, but just as a fun little side note, when this was released, I read these books very quickly because my partner at the time worked in marketing, and he actually was one of the head marketing people for the film. I've got a bunch of heart-shaped stickers that have the branding on it, and I used to have shirts and things. I think they even made a dress. There was a really cool limited artist run merch store for the film before everything happened. So let's watch the trailer.
Didn't do anything to stop the social workers when they came to take you away, now didn't they? Look at the bunny. Right here, honey. No! You will not trash this house. I went through a lot to get you back. And you better start showing some gratitude. I am your mother. Can't say I wanted you. Can't say I didn't do rabbit's tricks to try and get rid of you. If my father let me, you'd long been flushed down some toilet.
Come on, boy. You ain't listening to me. You ain't gonna be pissing your pants no more, you hear me?
I didn't know you had it in you to be so fatherly.
Hey, pay attention. It's not the little boy's fault.
Jeremiah, you're going home. Your grandma's here. God is a refuge for us.
You will not mock the Lord. 1, 2.
I want to tell you why Jesus came. I want to tell you to be ready so that on the last day...
He must be feeding you more than you ever fed me. Come on, you're coming with me. This is Kenny,
Hey,
your new dad.
I'm gonna be listening out for you tonight. You do out there and get a good job, all right?
Together out there now, big round of applause. That is the coal miner's dog.
God is my salvation.
There's something wrong with you, boy.
Go. This guy's back for a couple.
I've not seen it. It is very...
So it's a good film. It's compelling. It stars Dylan and Cole Sprouse as very young. They were very young at the time. They were in The Sweet Life of Jack and Cody. This is Asia Argento's work. She starred in it. She directed it. She was very close with J.T. Leroy. She had sex with J.T. Leroy and talked about that, which we can get to. Sure. She said she just thought that they make really realistic pussies these days.
Mm.
This was my purse through high school and until grad school, and we've got The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things stickers all over this.
Aw.
Yeah, my little
Very
lunchbox.
cute, very cute.
How deeply goth teen of me. But so yeah, this is one of the reasons I got excited about writing this episode is because J.T. Leroy's books were really meaningful to me, but also it was such a meaningful part of my life. Over time, the character of J.T. was reclusive and would only conduct phone interviews and projected a reluctant presence who was only cheered on by more successful fans. In particular, J.T. Leroy's public presence seemed to grow consistently relative to the fame of his greatest admirers in the press, but always reflected the same comely coarseness: oversized sunglasses, a large sun hat, as I kindly put it, a rough and tumble approach to wearing a blonde wig, and a distinctive raccoon penis bone necklace that Leroy has made his trademark talisman. Now,
Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
Oh, yes. Show and tell.
Mm-hmm. So I have
this
raccoon penis bone with J.T. Leroy's signature engraved on it.
Wow.
And this was given to me as a birthday gift from Mark Maron. Gave this to me for a birthday gift one year.
That's a cool birthday gift. Good job, Mark.
It really is.
My ex-boyfriend wore that on a necklace. So the significance of this is in the novel Sarah, JT is, as a very young child, pimped out by a truck stop pimp who pimps out a lot of young kids basically at this truck stop. And the way that this pimp shows their appreciation and sort of hierarchical value of the young child prostitutes was through, so everyone under their employ, under their care, was given a raccoon penis bone necklace. But the larger the raccoon penis bone, the higher your esteem with that truck stop pimp. This is where I learned the term lot lizard, which is a truck stop prostitute.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you're referring to a bottom.
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah. Leroy became a cultural phenomenon in the early 2000s, attracting a celebrity following that included names like Winona Ryder, Courtney Love, and Gus Van Sant. These celebrities not only endorsed Leroy's work, but also participated in readings and public events, further cementing Leroy's status in the literary and pop culture landscapes.
In 2005, John Nova Lomax published an article at 4 a.m.
Which is important.
Which is how you know that there's something. In the Houston Press, questioning the veracity of an essay by Leroy, published in the prestigious Oxford American's annual music issue. His primary gripe was that it was clearly fiction and therefore had no place in a collection of nonfiction essays. He starts off in the article hedging his bets about the lack of established facts and history about the author beyond their own stories. His first tip-off is a reference to Publix stores, which didn't exist in the setting of the story until years after the essay purportedly took place.
Which was Houston, Texas. And as somebody who grew up in Texas, if you started mentioning grocery stores we wouldn't have, not only would I know that you're lying, but I would also feel shortchanged because we have the shittiest grocery stores in Texas with the exception of H-E-B and Central Market. So I can relate to that. How dare you imply we have a Publix? Those sandwiches. From his article, it was a telling misstep. While he never specified the names of any of the bars Sarah sang in, the stripper dives she pole danced in, the motels they stayed at, or where the shotgun-toting record store clerks were, Leroy did manage to screw up one of the only specific places he mentioned. From there, he reached out to Leroy's team to vet some facts and was left even more perplexed.
The last thing you want is a reporter asking questions. So when he raised the issue to Leroy's camp, Leroy's assistant replied, "If you were to look at JT's works, you would find that all of them are published as fiction, even those pieces that are very close to his actual experiences. This is because JT doesn't really believe in the concept of true fact and true fiction. The way he sees it, any event that occurs is subject to interpretation from the person involved with it."
This gripe piece, in a niche section of a Texan newspaper, set off a series of investigative articles, notably by Stephen Beachy of New York Magazine and Warren St. John of the New York Times, that revealed that J.T. Leroy did not exist. And now let's take a look at the documentary about the hoax before we deep dive into exactly what happened here.
J.T. Leroy is a 21-year-old writer with 2 books of fiction based on his experiences as the son of a truck stop prostitute.
Hi, I'm J.T. Jeremiah Terminator Leroy.
There's not a lot of discovery in publishing. William Burroughs, Genet, Allen Ginsberg. To hear a new voice was exciting.
He doesn't like to show his face to the press.
JT, I just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Some people think that J.T. Leroy might not really exist.
name's Laura Albert, and I am the writer, J.T. Leroy. I felt like a misfit. I didn't want to write as myself. J.T. Leroy was created from my dream. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, turning tricks, living on the street. The books were taking off. J.T. had to walk amongst us. Savannah was over at my house, and I said, "You look like J.T. Leroy. You wear the sunglasses, a blonde wig." It was like Frankenstein, let there be life.
J.T. Leroy is a literary it boy.
Your stories are so alive.
It was a revolving door of celebrities.
I see Bono giving JT industry advice. Suddenly, JT is the go-to person for the fashion world.
I showed just enough to make them interested.
The media was tugging pretty hard at the curtain.
It turns out he may not be a he and may not even exist.
People are calling me. I don't know if this thing is bad or not.
What the heck is going on?
Hey, I really need to talk to you.
I didn't know how to shut it down.
There's like a helicopter around me. You feel like Goodfellas.
It feels like the whole world is watching.
You're not filming that, right?
Suddenly, I got a call.
This is Warren St. John from the New York Times.
He says, "I'm gonna get you." He knows everything. There is a huge tornado that's about to hit. All the headlines are saying, the biggest literary hoax of our time. It is not a hoax.
You don't want that call.
Nope.
You don't want that smoke. You do not want that smoke.
She is becoming my Jay-Z Knight in that I know she did some real tomfoolery, but she stands so strongly in her audacity. And she's grown from it.
Yeah.
She's cultivated it. A lot of the people we cover shriveled under the weight of truth and honesty, and she continued to thrive in it. And that ain't nothing, you know?
So J.T. Leroy was the construction of a woman named Laura Albert, who was a TV writer who aspired to bigger acclaim, who, if her story is to be believed, shared a lot of mutual trauma with the character she created. And to further atone for the diversion of deeply questionable fact from fiction, she published her works as fiction, despite her aggressive and public ruse to assert the authenticity of the stories she put forth.
The character of J.T. Leroy, who appeared in public, spoke to press, and founded deeply personal relationships with the celebs du jour, was actually Ms. Albert's sibling-in-law, Savannah Knoop, who stepped in as the public face of J.T. Leroy for the next 6 years. Now, just to establish for listenership, they are non-binary, so we will continue to refer to them as such.
Who?
Savannah Knoop. They're frequently misgendered in a lot of things that I read, and I just think that that's petty and unnecessary and stupid. And in the day of our Lord, 2024, like, we can do better than that.
I didn't realize that this ruse went on for 6 years. That's an incredible amount of time to get away with something like this.
It was during the press run for the film that all of this came out, because it was when my ex-boyfriend was deep in the marketing process for this film that it was like, well, so there's some news. And it was quite a bit. The revelation that J.T. Leroy was a fabrication crafted by Albert sparked debates about authorship, authenticity, and the exploitation of traumatic experiences for artistic and commercial gain, which is something we will see in pretty much every false memoir that we discuss. So.
Yeah. The literary and queer communities in particular felt betrayed, as many had embraced Leroy as a symbol of resilience and genuine. We got to find another word besides resilience.
Resilience, I mean, also harrowing,
as a community,
as a symbol of badassery. Badassery strong.
It's like the name Jessie for a girl.
Okay, well, they embraced Leroy as a symbol of badassery strong. That's my stand-in for the moment.
Badassery strong and genuine voice for marginalized experiences. The controversy also raised questions about the nature of identity and the limits of artistic license. challenging readers and critics to reconsider the relationship between a writer's identity and their work. Whether Miss Albert was a queer individual herself is the topic of some niche discourse, but her history in testing the waters in her JT identity, as well as her insistence that her persona have a viable public face in Ms.
Mix
Noop. I've never seen that abbreviation before.
I've never had to say it out loud. I've only seen it in writing, so your guess is as good as mine.
Whether Miss Albert was a queer individual herself is the topic of some niche discourse, but her history in testing the waters in her JT identity, as well as her insistence that her persona have a viable public face in Savannah Noop, have created a mess of uncertainty for erstwhile fans to untangle their belief. This is like really rife because I think there is pressure more than ever for the artist and the art to be the same. And that did not exist before. And part of that has to do with social media, celebrity coverage, literary celebrity. You can't just build narratives in your books. You have to build a narrative around you. You have to have a brand. And to be very cynical, it's part of the art of sales is people are just more engaged in something they think is true. It is what it is. We saw this in the Buffy St. Marie thing. If she had just come on as like an ally talking about those issues, would she have gotten as much enthusiasm? Probably not. Right? It's like, so I kind of understand an artist going, "Fuck you, I'm going to game the system."
I see that. I can see that. And in the case of J.T. Leroy and Laura Albert, because she published her work as fiction, if she hadn't gone the extra mile, not to establish a public persona with her sibling-in-law, but to have that public visage, that person, that representative, engage in very deeply untrue relationships with people, this could have been a very interesting, elaborate performance until it crossed over into actual emotional betrayal and having sex with people under false pretenses and establishing a false identity that drew out honesty from other people by offering up lies passed off as honesty themselves. This could have been a really transgressive artistic performance if not for the manipulation and gaslighting of people who weren't intentional participants to begin with.
Yeah, I agree.
Laura Albert eventually came forward, defending her use of a pseudonym and the creation of J.T. Leroy as necessary for expressing her own deep-seated traumas and experiences. She argued that the ability to write under the guise of Leroy freed her in ways that would have been impossible under her own identity. From an interview in the Paris Review, the interviewer asks, "Did you or do you feel any shame about misleading people who believed in JT?" And Albert says, "I bleed, but it's a different kind of shame. I'm sad I was so injured. Many people were inspired that someone so young could write what I was writing. JT is 15 years younger than me. All I can say is I'm sorry if people are disappointed or offended. If knowing that I'm 15 years older than Jeremy devalues the work, then I'm sorry they feel that way." I don't think anyone was mad that you're 15 years older than you claim to be necessarily.
I think you're missing the problem that she's getting at.
Okay.
Which is in the literary community, in Hollywood, talent is not nearly as important as presentation. So if she had gone and tried to sell these books as herself, there wouldn't have been any interest.
Of course not, because they were sold as authentic and there's nothing authentic about it.
But it's not even that. It's not even that. If she was selling them as a person that was 15 years younger and male, she had a far better chance of getting her work published than if she was a female that was, 35.
So she had to lie about it because of the circumstances of her actual life identity. She had to invent circumstances that were even more audacious.
I would be remiss to not can bring it up.
No, of course. No, I'm not.
And this is especially like in the for our younger listeners, the 90s And the early 2000s for women were like really not good. Heroin chic was the trend, which was to look like you were so thin that you looked like you were addicted to heroin. And there was a big fascination with underage, barely legal looking girls. Women were not getting opportunities. And so it does not escape me that a really talented writer that was a woman that was in at that time to be 35 was to be invisible. I could understand the impulse to create the right kind of author.
Again, I don't have any real concern about that until you start creating false real relationships with people based on
that part absolutely. And I think that's the thing we saw in the Buffy St. Maria. It goes too far and there's no off ramp. If instead it had been just maintaining this anonymity, doing these 2 books, and then coming out in an essay for like the New Yorker where you say, I manufactured this identity in order to be able to get published. And then that would have been like this big, like, oh my God, like the industry's so f***ed up. Like it could have, there was an off ramp for this.
And it would have been huge. It would have positioned her at the crux of a cultural discussion that she could have been the leader of. And that's what hits so hard. It's like, it's not the lies. It's that you had such a grand opportunity and you squandered it so people would to double down on like, who cares? Everybody lies all the time. To have access to celebrity. Exactly.
To keep it going.
One of the things that I think is really relevant here is at what point can we truly, truly skeptically believe anybody's personal anecdote because they're always telling it through the lens of their experience. And as soon as it's commercialized, as soon as there is a financial incentive, there is just by nature of being viewed, there is a veneer of inauthenticity and there's a facade. Because as soon as you're doing so, just like in front of a camera, you know, when a camera is present, there's a sense of performance. At what point are we allowing people to tell their version of events as they remember them, as their brain has crafted, constructs to protect them from shame or guilt or fear, the way that every brain does in every human experience? At what point do we decide where does the lens of truth, like where do we mount that?
My studies were in creative nonfiction, so this was absolutely something that was discussed in every class, in every workshop, nonstop. It wasn't misery lit, but it was the guy that like claimed that he had been like a secret agent for the government while he was working on like a mainstream TV show kind of thing. And so it was very much in the air, like where is the line? Because the minute anything becomes a story, you kind of move things around. And we started getting at this thing called like emotional truth. There's a difference between that and generating out of whole cloth an action that someone else took towards you. It had to do with the ethics of not only how do you tell the truth, but how do you, when you're portraying other people that actually exist, there has to be a level of care in how that's crafted, right? Because they're real people, they're not characters,
right? And facts of action are things that the universe can observe took place. Facts of intent, facts of reaction, the fact of your emotional truth and how you feel and how you stand in that in your feelings, those are all true and they belong to you. But when it comes to actions, they happened or they didn't. The intent, the impact, all of that is subjective.
And especially when you're dealing with misery lit, when you've got people making accusations of sexual assault, child molestation, neglect, domestic violence, when you start putting these things to paper and calling it nonfiction, you start indicting people. I wrote this biopic and I had to look at the events of a person's life and start deciding which things to include and maybe making a character that's like a melange of a bunch of people that existed, and even in that, there's some degree of accuracy, but you also, for narrative movement and pacing, there are places where you need to move it along or you need to kind of move things around a little bit so that like the emotional truth of the story is still there without getting hung up on being too precise, because you can also be too precise in the truth and then it's fucking boring. It's a skill. It's a skill. Storytelling is a skill.
Truly.
Narrative is a skill.
Truly.
And there's no denying the innate talent of Laura Albert.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I would be more upset if it was plagiarized. If you've like turned tricks and done sex work and then you write like a highly fictionalized version of it and like create a fake persona, like I'm not that mad at it. Like if it's still coming from like you went through,
True.
I'm cool with it.
But hoes have an unspoken but equally strong sort of social contract of privacy. It's like patient-client privilege, attorney-client privilege, hoe-client privilege. And, but we don't lose a license. We just are that. We care enough to want your repeat business, so we're gonna not air out your dirty laundry.
And it's never gonna go well anyway.
Yeah,
like,
no, we want someone else to pay us too. You're not gonna pay us anymore if we talk about it, and the next guy won't pay us either because he's gonna worry he'll be you.
Just ask Stormy Daniels like how awesome it is. Like Sydney Leathers, like let's see like how awesome was it really, right? Like,
Yeah, both really, really incredible women.
But if you ask them how it felt to be a whistleblower in those situations,
not great.
Like it hurt them far more than it hurt the people that they. So going back to Louis Menard's article, he outlines a variety of defenses authors put forth for their deception, and this one would be the literature professor's defense. This is the argument that the distinction between fact and fiction, although it may appear fundamental, is a fairly recent development in the history of writing, only 2 or 3 centuries old. Along with that distinction came the practice of putting the author's name on a book. And along with both of those came the ideology of authenticity, the belief that literary expression must be genuine and original. And so here's a clip of James Frey, who was found to have committed literary fraud in his misery lit memoir,
A Million Little Pieces.
A Million Little Pieces. And after he was caught out, here's him giving his defense.
I don't care much about truth, or I don't care about the definition of truth that most people live by. I don't think truth and fact are the same thing. I think truth is an incredibly subjective, individual thing. The first time I started writing A Million Little Pieces, I'd been searching for a voice for years and years and years. And one day I sat down and I started writing that book, and I wrote the first sentence. And it felt right. It felt more right than anything I had ever written. And so I kept going, and over the course of a couple days I wrote probably the first 15 or 20 pages of it. And I had never worked that fast before. I was kind of stunned by it. At the end of it, I looked at those pages and I was like, I did it. This is how I've always been trying to write. This is the voice I've always been trying to find. That book coming out and the controversies related to it were obviously a big moment for me, but probably not in the ways people might think. You know, I didn't write that book as a memoir. I've never thought of it as a memoir. We didn't submit it to publishers as memoirs, even though it was published as one. When the controversy blew up and, you know, I was sort of written off by the publishing business and by the literary community, instead of being upset about it, I was kind of excited. I was like, you know, I had to work within your system. I wrote a book that wasn't what it was published as. I always knew I wasn't born to work in that system, and I won't ever do it again. You know, from that point forward, I was free. I got kicked out of a club I didn't want to be a part of, and it was awesome. Since then, I've literally done what I want. I call it what I want. I don't say I write fact or fiction. I don't write novels or memoirs or, you know, narrative nonfiction. I just write books. I tell stories. The expectations and rules and conventions of the literary community or the publishing community or society in general mean absolutely nothing to me. What means something to me is telling a story in the way I think is the right way to do it. And if I need to use factual elements or fictional elements or things that live in the gray area between, if I have to use grammar of my own invention, if I have to lay the pages out Even at this point in my career, I publish my books how I want. You know, I don't publish through conventional publishers anymore. I publish through an art gallery. I publish my books online myself. The Million Little Pieces controversy really freed me to be as radical as I want, to break every rule I want, and to not have to care what other people thought. It was great.
And that is James Frey.
It reminds me of porn. Everything reminds me of porn, but it reminds me of, when I was a young starlet, I had it in my mind that my fans want authenticity, and they do. But I don't owe anybody authenticity in the way that I have sex on camera.
Every time that you access a memory, it changes slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's stored in the hard drive of your brain as this new, slightly different version. And so I was like, I don't want to ever have to be beholden to like exactly what happened, because I don't even know that I have access to that anymore. Every time I've thought about it and every time that I've recalled it, like I've changed it slightly.
Yeah.
And not on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but like because what frame of mind you're in, who you are, remembering something when I was 7, being 10 and remembering when I was 7, and then being 25 and remembering that same memory when I was 7,
Mm-hmm.
who I am has changed so fundamentally that memory is just going to be different for me, right?
Right.
I didn't want to get caught up in the mire of this because I was like, man, it's so limiting.
I can get that because essentially, and listening to you talk about you writing something based on your life versus an actual memoir, when you write memoir, you are offering up the well of your own personal trauma, your own nuance, the entire life that you've lived through the limited lens that you can observe it through, which changes day by day. When you can separate yourself from it, you can tell deeper truths because you're not tattling on yourself. You're not saying, I genuinely feel this way.
And honestly, like I said this earlier, the particulars of the trauma are not what's interesting. What's interesting is what the trauma taught me about the human condition. I know that when people act this way, it's because they have this kind of wound in the past.
Also, that brings us back to the idea of when is writing reflective of the author, and when can we assume that this is more memoir than an actual memoir would be, and when can we assume this is a person writing about concepts that they, as a creative, have chosen to explore in this particular creative way, and respecting that creative process means respecting that authenticity isn't the selling point.
Fundamentally, first and foremost, from writing, it should engage, it should entertain, or it should educate. If it's not doing at least one of these 3 things, it has failed as a piece of writing. Otherwise, you're taking notes in a lecture, right? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's frivolous. It's marginalia. The pushback that's come now is what it should not do is miseducate and misinform.
Yes.
And if I were to write a story and I was like, I want to write a story about a mixed Black girl in Georgia in like 1860, if I were to write that story, it would be me guessing, which means it would be miseducating.
Yes.
It would be actively misinforming. And that, I would say, is like, we don't want to do that. That what has happened in the literary and entertainment community is we've listened to people of color, they've listened to women, and slowly over a period of 30, 40 years, it's not set in stone, but we've kind of created this loose standard of that we want to not perpetrate stereotypes and to speak over the voices of those that we're talking about. That's like a community choice that's kind of evolved over like the last 30 or 40 years. It's like a new kind of standard. Whereas writing something completely from a different character identity point of view would have been kind of totally acceptable in before like the early 2000s. A good example of a book that I just had it in mind Memoirs of a Geisha. It wasn't sold as memoir. Like that was sold as fiction. But at the time, it was perfectly acceptable for a man to write a book from the point of view of a Japanese woman in like during World War II. And everyone was like, that's fine.
Right.
No one would publish that today because it would be seen as just being in poor taste.
So
because what would a Western white man know about the experience of a Japanese sex worker like woman?
Right.
What is he contributing to the narrative other than his fantasies of what her life is like? This brings us to Love and Consequences by Margaret Jones.
Yes.
So in 2008, Margaret Jones published her memoir, Love and Consequences, in which she recounts her childhood and adolescence as a half-Native American girl growing up in a Black family in the gang-ridden neighborhoods of South Central Los Angeles. Jones's story of survival and redemption in a world of violence and poverty quickly garnered attention and praise for its raw depiction of a girl's life in one of America's most dangerous zip codes.
In a credulous review of the memoir, the New York Times described it as an intimate, visceral portrait of the gangland drug trade of Los Angeles as seen through the life of one household. A stern but loving Black grandmother working 2 jobs, her 2 grandsons who quit school and became Bloods at ages 12 and 13, her 2 granddaughters, both born addicted to crack cocaine, and the author, a mixed-race white and Native American foster child who at age 8 came to live with them in their mostly Black community. She ended up following her foster brothers into the gang, and it was only when a high school teacher urged her to apply to college that Ms. Jones even began to consider her future. Inspiring.
I mean, I live in downtown and South Central, so
yeah.
Love and Consequences was released to critical acclaim, with reviewers and readers alike lauding the authenticity and emotional depth of Jones's supposed experiences. The book's detailed portrayal of gang life and the struggles of poverty resonated with many, positioning Jones as an important new voice in memoir and social commentary.
The truth about Margaret Jones' fabricated memoir came to light shortly after the book's publication in 2008, when her own sister discussed the falsehoods in the story with the New York Times in, by the way, an article titled "In Sisters, Love and an Urge to Wring Her Neck," which is the best description of a sister relationship I've ever heard. And that came out less than 3 weeks after the New York Times published that glowing review that I read a few minutes ago of her memoir. It was revealed at that time that her name is actually Margaret Seltzer, not Margaret Jones. And she was not of Native American descent. She had not grown up in South Central Los Angeles, and she had not experienced the gang life she so vividly described in her memoir. She was actually entirely a white girl. She grew up with her biological parents in San Fernando Valley, in Sherman Oaks specifically, which is, if you live in Los Angeles, you know that as a pretty upscale, pretty well-to-do, pretty white bread suburb of LA, which is also where we shoot the majority of pornography in America. And she attended Campbell Hall, an affluent Episcopalian day school in North Hollywood, which is not too far from where I lived in North Hollywood also.
Yeah. The fraud was not just in the memoir. Now, Margaret Seltzer did give an interview, and she gave an interview to NPR as Margaret Jones. NPR did this interview with her, and they were about to publish it. And then the fraud was exposed, like this girl named Margaret Seltzer. Mm-hmm. And NPR decided to post the interview anyway with a kind of pre-script explaining what had happened. And I just want to point out that I believe the interviewer she's talking to is a Black woman.
Okay.
That's the NPR host. So let us
listen. So, what we can hear from this so far is that she speaks with a black scent. She is continuing to sort of double down to some degree.
This is pre-exposure.
Okay, so she is doubling down on everything. She is speaking in this way.
This is the interview before the truth came out.
Yesterday, we said we'd bring you a story about a woman who made an improbable journey from gang life in South Central Los Angeles to college in Oregon. It was to be one of two conversations we planned to bring you about gang life. The other was from veteran writer Jimmy Breslin, a Pulitzer Prize winner, on his new book, The Good Rat. The first, though, was a memoir called Love and Consequences. It won rave reviews for its heartfelt but tough-minded portrayal of life in South Central Los Angeles. I talked to the author a few days ago, on the very day that a New York Times reviewer praised the book as a humane and deeply affecting memoir. When you first hear the author, you can understand why. Here, we're just getting started. Should I call you Margaret?
Anything you want is good. Margaret works.
Margaret's good?
Mhm.
And when we talk about it's Michelle, by the way. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for talking to us.
Oh, thank you so much.
Do you prefer when I first refer in your first reference, should it be Margaret B. Jones? Is that what you prefer? So when I first, I say this is, when I first say your name, do you want it to be Margaret B. Jones, or is that just for copyright purposes?
I mean, that's my name. I'm not quite on that professional trip yet.
Okay.
I'm still kind of reeling in all this, I'm still amazed people want to read my book.
It's deep.
Yeah, really deep.
It's deep. All right.
No one cared about me 5 years ago, I'll tell you that.
Well, somebody obviously did. He wouldn't be here, baby.
So as a woman who lives in Los Angeles, do you think that this is representative of how a white woman who's raised in Sherman Oaks would speak?
Who was raised in Sherman Oaks?
Yeah.
Probably not.
It seems like she's kind of leaning into.
I mean, I grew up with a bunch of girls that sounded like I grew up around a bunch of white girls that sounded like this, but we were.
But you were in Fresno.
Yeah, we were in Sherman Oaks.
She's doing this that as a white girl who wants to be not a piece of shit. You don't do this shit, and it's like, what the f are you doing? Stop it.
And that's why I wanted to get that in there when she's like, I'm not on that yet. And she's like, well, someone cared, baby. And it's like that moment of solidarity that is predicated on a falsehood. I wanted us to hear that.
Yeah.
That the host drops her tone and goes, well, someone cared, baby. You're here.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like that is a kind of intimacy that's being presumed around ethnicity, and that is predicated on fraud. But I wanted us to listen through where she reads a passage so you get an idea of what the book was like.
Okay.
So they're trying to decide what passage they want.
Okay, you ready? Okay,
I'm ready.
We're gonna get started. Okay. Oh, wait, before we go, there's a passage you wanted to read, and I wasn't sure where it was. I know it was on one. Where did you want to read from? I just need to time it out. Where it's from 139 to...
It's whatever works for you. You had said starting at 147.
But I don't see when you were going up to CYA. See, that's what
it says within the CYA, there's different levels.
Okay.
It's wherever you would want to start. I was trying to figure out where. It's so hard to pick excerpts that sort of stand on their own and give enough background. But
right.
There's that.
I'm going to pause it. This is so uncomfortable. I get, they're trying to find the right passage to read, but knowing what it is, all I can hear is the woman who is wasting a Black woman's time trying to perform an identity that she simply doesn't possess, trying to perform memories that aren't in her head, and trying to perform victimization that was simply never inflicted upon her, nor threatened to be inflicted upon her.
I have never actually looked up a picture of her.
Oh,
okay. This is interesting. I guess this is some picture that was taken for promotion of the book. So in the photo, looks like she's posed in a living room. She's wearing a big baggy t-shirt with basically native folks, cowboys and Indian style, like American pastoral from the Indian Wars, kind of that kind of a painting. And then over it, so this is on like a big baggy t-shirt. She got the fake nails. She could, I guess, she could vaguely be ethnically ambiguous, but she was claiming to be white and Native American. And the t-shirt says, "Deport illegal aliens, the original Homeland Security, fighting terrorism since 1492," which is especially ironic. That it's perpetrating this fraud, and then it's like meant to kind of look like a hood rat.
That's it.
She's got the long nails. She's got the big baggy crisp white tee. She's got the smirking, like overplucked eyebrows and the kind of smirk. It's a very deliberate. It's not just a literary hoax. It's red face.
Yeah, and
it's brown face. The revelation of Seltzer's deception elicited strong reactions, particularly from the African American and Native American communities she had falsely claimed to represent. Critics condemned her for exploiting and misrepresenting the real struggles faced by these communities, arguing that her fabrications undermined efforts to address the systemic issues of poverty, violence, and racial discrimination. The literary community and the public at large were once again outraged, feeling betrayed by Seltzer's manipulation of their trust and empathy.
Margaret Seltzer did respond publicly after the exposure of her fabrications, offering an apology for her actions to the New York Times. Quote, "In a sometimes tearful, often contrite telephone interview from her home on Monday, Ms. Seltzer, 33, who's known as Peggy, admitted that the personal story she told in the book was entirely fabricated. She insisted, though, that many of the details in the book were based on the experiences of close friends she had met over the years while working to reduce gang violence in Los Angeles." The article continues quoting her. She says, "For whatever reason, I was really torn, and I thought it was my opportunity to put a voice to people who people don't listen to," Ms. Seltzer said. "I was in a position where at one point people said, 'You should speak for us because nobody else is going to let us in to talk.' Maybe it's an ego thing, I don't know. I just felt that there was good that I could do and there was no other way that someone would listen to it."
The opposite was true.
Mm-hmm.
Because if she had written it as herself, no one would have listened.
True.
But if she wrote it in brown face, in red face,
yeah,
then people would listen to it.
But because if she wrote it as herself, it would just be another story of a white woman commenting on the strife of people of color, which we have plenty of, and many voices who are far more acclaimed and established and able to articulate than this.
Or she could have made the lead character a white girl in a foster home in South Central. And then when doing press about the book, say, I worked in that community while I was going to school and I wanted to tell the stories and I wanted to position myself as someone that was kind of in the mix and like a way to tell this, share the stories and the things that I saw, but while maintaining my positionality as an outsider.
Yeah.
That would have been
been a great story, and it would have been something that people could rally behind. Maybe not in the same way that they did, certainly, but absolutely something that people could honestly, in truth, rally behind. And she wouldn't have had to walk back all of her bullshit.
So, referring back to Louis Manon's article, "Literary Hoaxes and the Ethics of Authorship," he described this as the surrogacy defense. This is the theory that although a particular event recounted in the book may not have happened to the author, it happened to someone. Such a book, then, is really the life story of a group. The memoirist should be understood as representing all African American men in the era of Jim Crow, or all Indigenous people in Guatemala. Experiences common to the group are therefore legitimately represented as happening to a single quasi-allegorical figure.
So it's not that I lived this, it's that I imagined all of the ways that somebody could live this based on the actual lived experiences of people whose stories are insignificant in comparison to the grander fictitious story that I'm telling. There's the amalgamation of everything they're saying, but my voice, and she acknowledges that her voice carries more weight because she's a white woman who's established, who's educated, who's not on the fray of society. But she doesn't, she fails to recognize why she's the one being heard. And instead of trying to fix the system that only champions voices that are not the lived voices, she leans into it because, like, well, no one's going to listen to them unless I am the star who shares the story. And like,
yeah, well, it's the white savior trope, right?
That's it.
It becomes I alone am the white savior.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And I think this is a good place for us to take a break. We have a part 2. We're going to go over a couple more cases of literary fraud, of especially as it pertains to Misery Lit, because each of these instances is a different facet of kind of what this phenomenon is. And so we wanted to give each one its full due and really talk about how they're different from each other and how they all also operate under the same thing. And we can get into why it seems to be mostly women.
Mostly white women.
Mostly white women. You know, Ward's being a little hard on the beaver. I know we've really been having a go at our sisters, you know, and we can't say white women and then act like we are not included in that category.
No, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
and so I also wanted to be mindful of that for my listeners, that when we start talking about white folks, if we are also white, we have to acknowledge that, like, we're also talking about ourselves.
Yes.
And to try to catch ourselves in the language, you know, and make sure that we're putting we're not othering ourselves to separate ourselves from it.
Right.
That we're recognizing that we are operating within that same system.
We're not replacing them as the saviors who are actually well positioned to tell their story. We're not trying to offset them.
Yeah.
We're trying to shine a little bit of light on the whole situation. But you're right. At the end of the day, I am still a white woman, and I see in the stories of white women the ways that we are so uniquely inclined to champion our own trauma, our own tears, our own stories over the voices of anybody else.
Like there's no way around that.
Okay, hi.
Credits. The script was written by Miss Ella Darling.
Hi, I did another one.
You did another one, baby.
Oh, thank you. I love you.
We are your hosts. I'm Sovereign Sire.
I'm Ella Darling.
Our links to all our socials will be in the show notes, as well as all the sources that were used for today. Again, in the show notes. Please support us on Patreon. And if you don't have the means to do that, we totally get it. But if you could at least just give us a 5-star review, or maybe write out a little review on Apple Podcasts. If you could rate us on your Spotify, just give us a little 5 stars. Also, if you follow us on TikTok, if you repost our videos, that really helps us with the algorithm. And also, if you bookmark our TikToks, that counts like 5 likes. Like it's like 5 times more powerful than a like. So even if you just repost and bookmark our cute little clips and mini documentaries on TikTok, like, again, that is so helpful. It's illreputepod on TikTok. Illreputepod.
Illreputepod.
All right, we did it. We got a new review. Very good.
We did?
Yeah, we did.
Hi, thank you. Individual
Do you want to read it? Here.
Yeah.
I will. I'm going to read it to you right now.
Wait, who wrote it?
It's not someone we know.
Oh, we're
like, it's not.
Lay it on me. I'm ready to receive.
Unless you do know this person, but this is from Radiozar.
Nope.
Is that your friend?
No clue. No idea. Oh, that's even better.
Radiozar 2002 says, "This podcast should be in your queue. Entertaining, informative, and well-researched. The Ill Repute podcast will teach you things you never thought you'd need to know. Sometimes salty, often hilarious, always informative. Sovereign Sire and Ella Darling provide a perspective that you might not agree with, but I guarantee you need to listen to. The range of topics and the passion of the presenters makes this a must-have podcast."
Oh my God, I love
Very nice
that.
review.
That is such a good review. That is so good. Look, I'm not asking for good reviews. You can tell The whole
No,
internet.
I want them good. I would like the good reviews, please. Please keep them. If it's going on Apple, please keep them very, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I've reconvened my thoughts, and I thought, actually, I only want your good reviews. Just independent of anything.
All right.
Love you so much. Love you guys. Love our listeners. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Mwah. Kisses. Bye.
Mwah. Kisses. All right. Stop recording.